Welcome to the Ascension Business Network. You are listening to the Leadership and Transformation podcast series. Our program is sponsored by Ascension Transformation Solutions, your business transformation technology partner. Steve Rayner will be your host for today's program.
Ken Neishi has been in the food industry for over 40 years, holding a variety of executive positions with some of the best-known food brands. Ken served as Director of Operations at Nabisco and Vice President of Operations at Beatrice Foods, Michael Foods, Columbus, Bioplex Nutrition, Boyds Coffee, and as Chief Operating Officer at Bioplex Nutrition. Ken has been involved in a number of dramatic transformations of workplace practices and culture change, leading to dramatic improvements in bottom-line performance. With me is Bill Bellegarde, and we plan on exploring with Ken his experiences as a transformative leader. Welcome, Ken.
Thank you, Steve.
Ken, you've had a number of different positions as we mentioned in the intro, with some of the best-known brands, and you've been through that process, kind of gone through a journey of learning about how to transform organizations. I'd like to kind of start at the beginning. Back in your days at Nabisco in the 90s, what was sort of the situation facing Nabisco then, and what did you learn from your experiences in trying to change things at Nabisco?
Okay, so prior to becoming Director of Operations at Nabisco, after the experience of closing a plant in California with Nabisco, I was transferred over to the Indianapolis plant, which was producing margarine, and I was in the position as a plant manager. This margarine plant had approximately 200 team members working there. It was a unionized facility. And there, when I walked into the situation, there was a significant distrust with management, and even distrust even with the union representation from the team members at the plant. So my predecessor, well, let me back up a little bit. So I was assigned to go in there and to try to build some sort of team process within that plant because of it was so dysfunctional due to the distrust with management as well as the union representation. My predecessor had started a high-performance team concept in one section of the plant, thinking that was a way to start a transformation process with the 200 team members in the plant. It was a island to nation approach that really did not work. With the dysfunctionality in the plant and the team members, it created so much noise within the organization on that one part of the plant that it was not successful. And after 1 year of trying to make the high-performance team concept work, I had to disband that or break that up and just go back to a traditional method of managing that plant. At that time, that was when I was first introduced to Bill Bellegarde and his team concepts as well as his leadership skills process. And despite the fact that it didn't work, Bill and I did a lot of consulting to decide to disband that group. So I had to shift my focus in working with the team members and building a high-performance team process to work with Bill in developing the leadership of the ops leadership team, where I could make a difference, and then they could make a difference into the rest of the plant.
And Ken, when you say it didn't work or it failed, was the team itself not performing at a higher level, or was it really the interaction with the other teams that created some of the problems and issues?
The team had the right motivation and the right focus to work within their own. It was one line out of 10 lines in the plant, I think it was, that this concept was tried. And so the pressure from their peers was so significant that it created problems on a daily basis, really. I mean, that may be a little bit of an exaggeration, but really on a daily basis. And then it created so much noise that the rest of the plant wasn't functioning to the degree that it was supposed to be.
If you were to sort of highlight some of your learning from that experience, what were some things you really pulled out of it?
It was really that island to nation approach. You can't drive a transformation process in one segment, or I shouldn't say can't. It's very, very difficult and challenging to take one part of the plant, a small part of a plant or an organization, and try to make a transformation process work when you're where the pressures are just so high that it makes it fail.
Now, you went from that experience to Michael Foods. You're the vice president of operations there, and I mean, take us through some of the facts and figures there, because I mean, the transformation at Michael Foods is really quite extraordinary. And take us through kind of what you were able to achieve bottom line, and then maybe tell us a little bit about the process you went through to achieve that.
And this one, Ken, was a private equity. There were private equity firms involved in the process, and there were several rounds of financing, and this added an extra degree of complexity and a lot of other flux. But you were able to manage all that. You may want to say something about the private equity turns and that you guys went through during the process, because a number of companies are going through that as well.
So I joined one division of Michael Foods, which was the largest division. It was the egg division, and it was a large division within Michael Foods. My responsibility was with 5 manufacturing plants that produced egg products in all different forms. Michael Foods also had another egg division, and it was called the Pipettis, that they purchased 3 years prior to me joining the company. Pipettis was based on the East Coast, and MG Walbaum was based in the Midwest. The Pipetti organization had 4 manufacturing plants on the East Coast. So I had the responsibility of 5 Midwestern plants, and then Pipettis had 4 manufacturing plants on the East Coast producing like products. The Pipettis organization was still ran by the Pipetti family, whereas the MG Walbaum side was run by a separate organization or a separate division. There were many attempts, I should say several attempts in 3 years prior to me joining the company, of integrating the 2 divisions as one egg company or working together as one egg company. And those attempts they failed drastically because the family-run business on the Pipetti side looked at Michael Food as the big bad corporate guys trying to make change and completely change their processes, but more importantly, their organization that they were very sensitive about. And so they held on to their traditional way of managing their business on the Pipetti side. So after 12 months of building capabilities within the 5 plants within MG Walbaum, the president of who I reported to, sat me down and told me that my new assignment or new challenge was to integrate the 2 egg division operations teams into one. I frankly looked at him and in kind words told him he's got to be kidding me, because I was not given the responsibility to manage the egg division with Pipettis. Pipettis had their own VP of operations, who was the son of the founder of Pipetti's Egg Company. And so I had to take this on without having the direct responsibility of overseeing those 4 plants or the operations team in the East Coast. He didn't care. He just told me, I don't care how you do it. You're going to find a way to integrate and drive synergies within the organization across the two divisions. That's when I re-engaged with Bill Belgard. I told him I needed help to find a way to create this transformation process of the two egg divisions. And Bill came in, and we were in my office on the whiteboard, just him and I, for 3 solid days, developing a transformation process from the ground up, basically. And I think the biggest key for me there was Bill didn't walk in with a textbook and open the textbook up and say, here you go, Ken, just follow this. It was literally building this transformation process from the ground up on the whiteboard. I'm not sure, Bill, how many times we rejiggered that process on the whiteboard, but it had to be several times that we did that.
I think Ken, you used the process really that we put up on the whiteboard to think through and talk through the philosophy of the approach and really think through how we would do it. And so there was the what and the how and the why. And so you could see the what up on the board, and the how and the why was all the 3 days worth of conversation for how to approach this. And well, you continue and you can talk about the results, which are phenomenal.
Before really launching the transformation process, one of the things that Bill and I decided to do was to make sure that we could build some trust in the Papetti organization, in the Papetti operations organization. So it was critical for me to partner with the VP of operations on the Papetti side, but partner in a way that I was not going to be the big bad corporate guy coming in and changing the organization and just putting all of my people into their side of the business. So there was some time spent. If I remember right, it was probably 3 months that I spent trying to build that trust on the Papetti side before we launched the continuous improvement process, the transformation process within operation, which was called the Operations Council. And so we launched that Operations Council, which was cross-functional teams and cross-location teams within the Papetti and Walbaum division across 9 plants. Even though it was on the whiteboard, we had the key leaders in both divisions participate in building the vision and the strategy of that process to integrate the two divisions. Significant focus as we launched this process was developing a leadership or launching a leadership development process that would train and develop the leaders of both organizations, not only from the Papetti side, but even on the MG Walbaum side. So that development was done side by side. In other words, we didn't just focus on the Papettis. The development was on both sides, where both key leaders were participating in that development and that transition. At that time, as we started to launch that process, I hired 2 key leaders from Nabisco who were familiar with continuous improvement process and team building. And one was put on the MG Walbaum side, and one was put also on the Papetti side. So I had 2 key leader influencers in the process that made a significant difference in driving results over the two divisions. Over 3 years, we delivered over $35 million in productivity savings that went to the bottom line. Those were hard results. And what was key was creating a financial measurement system that was bulletproof, not only from the Papetti side, but also from the corporate Michael Foods side. It was extremely important to have that measurement process in place and drive and showing the hard results that we could defend to anybody that would try to question those results as being overinflated. After 2 years in the process, Michael Foods we changed the private equity firm. It sold to a new private equity firm. And at that time, the Pipetti side was, I want to say, bought out. So they cashed out their portion of what they owned within Michael Foods. And there was a significant leadership change at that time where my counterpart left the company, and I assumed the responsibility of all 9 plants at that time. The significance of that was it was important for me as a leader now of the entire operations organization to not change the course of what we were doing. We were driving significant results from a financial standpoint. There were significant results on the soft side to develop the leadership in both organizations. And what was important for me as Bill continued to coach me was to not change all of a sudden the process in which we were, the transformation process that we were taking on. I think that was a significant, I know that was a significant key step in for us to continue to drive the results now in one egg division. So we continue to drive synergy productivity across the 9 plants. I'll end with that message in the sense that it was important to stay consistent as a leader and to have the leaders in the organization in both divisions, now as one, to be consistent in what we were doing that we built over the last 12 months to 18 months in the process. The process was so impactful and successful that the president who hired me and now is now the president of the entire egg division decided to implement the change process or the transformation process across all of Michael Foods' egg division. So he took sales, marketing, HR, R&D, and the farm production, which we were a fully integrated company, having chickens with producing the eggs all the way through distributing the product. He took that entire organization and we launched the Operations Council across all of those additional functions in the company. It was another success story. We drove an additional $45 million in productivity savings in the 3 years that we did that. When I was as long as I was with Michael Foods Egg Company. One individual that made the most significant change as we started this process in Michael Foods was actually the president of the egg division, the person that launched this throughout the rest of the organization. He transitioned from a short-term thinking president, a very traditional way of thinking of how to run a company, to more of a long-term thinking. And I'll give you an example. We would have monthly leadership team meetings that was very focused on the previous month's results. As Bill caught on to this new way of thinking.
The plant manager you're talking about there. I mean, the president of the egg company, Bill Goucher.
Yes, Bill. I'm sorry. Yeah, Bill Goucher, the president of the egg division, made that significant transition from short-term thinking into long-term thinking by he got away from the monthly results being the only focus on the monthly meetings to focusing on more into what the long-term strategies and how those were being achieved to drive results long-term within the company.
Ken, as I remember, you did that because you helped him focus on only spending a few minutes at the beginning of the meeting reviewing last month's numbers and all the rest of it had to be spent on the future.
That's correct.
Yeah, and so there was okay, Bill, you got the president. Okay, Mr. President, you've got a few minutes to talk about last month's numbers, and then everything else has to be focused on what we're doing going forward. And he did that, and his thinking changed because.
And to further that example would be that the monthly meetings that were focused short term, the main focus was to be negative. So it was a focus on the negative results, and even the positive results, whether that be in operations or sales or marketing or HR, were not celebrated. It was about taking the negative results and in a negative way, trying to turn those around. And it wasn't a question of whether we had to turn them or no, it wasn't a question of trying to turn them around. It was, you have no choice. You had to make those negative results turn into a positive. So it was when we transitioned out of that, there was a significant transition into celebrating wins, successes. Not only big successes, but small successes.
You were talking about this transition that occurred. You introduced this operations council, and that increased the amount of coordination that was going on between all these different groups in manufacturing that had been occurring, or in your operations side of the business. And then you introduced some training, some leadership development training. What impact did that have on the behaviors of the people, both on the side, the actual the production side, and of the management of the folks? What did you see in terms of behavior change among people as this council got going and the training began to take hold?
There's a couple of things: enthusiasm and motivation, and those were driven by they could see what's in it for them. Not only these are the soft results from a leadership development standpoint, but they were seeing themselves growing. They were not only seeing their team driving results, they were seeing individual leaders growing and themselves growing. And so there was enthusiasm to learn more. There was enthusiasm to grow as leaders, driven by the fact that they could see hard results. I might have said this already, but there was a great learning for me that you can drive all the soft results, and soft results meaning that you can see people developing, you can see teams working together. And I got caught up in thinking that was the best thing since sliced bread. But if you don't have the hard results to match up with those soft results, it really didn't mean anything. And for me to learn that and then transfer that learning to the rest of the key leaders in the organization was really significant. Because after I went through the transition of learning the soft results weren't going to get me promotions or weren't going to get me more money in my paycheck, I had to accept that myself, that the hard results were equally, if not more important. And then transferring that same learnings on to the rest of the leaders in the egg division.
It's great that we all feel good about this, but if we don't make money, then it doesn't really count.
To that point, but one other thing to add was we strategized quite a bit of how to involve actually some key leaders in the rest of the organization. So how do we get the president of the egg company to participate participate to some level, but without trying to overmanage what we were trying to do? In other words, looking over my shoulder and trying to influence the process in a different way, in a more micromanaging way.
It seems very significant too that you got the president to begin to take this longer term perspective and really emphasize that, because I can imagine that must have helped create more, a higher level of involvement and engagement in the day to day, activities of greater expansion of effort and focus by the level below him. I mean, they were now being freed up to do things that P formerly was kind of looking over their shoulder on.
That's exactly right, Steve. I mean, and they began to see that their voice was being heard and their actions were being recognized. So that was significant. I mean, in the traditional way of thinking, the people, below the top of the organization would always feel that they're not contributing to the company because they're not being listened to, and they're not feel that they're participating in and they're just doing their everyday job.
One of the things that I noticed that happened with the operations council is that when Ken moved it up to it and became the process for the corporation, is that the functional groups like finance and HR, who had been helpful and helpful in ways, especially with the Papettis, in helping figure out how to have the financial measures that people would believe they were involved in it. So Kim was saying, don't just look down and judge me, come down here and help me figure out how to do this. And they did. So the sense they helped embed it, they were part of it. But also the operations council for the functional organizations became the place to be. So people would show up at these meetings just because that was where you could find out what was really going on in the company. If you missed one of those, you didn't really know what was going on in the company. So finance people and HR people, other folks that would show up and want to know what was happening in the operations council, just so they could be part of what was going on, and so they could know, because decisions were being made in real time there that really affected the future of the company, and people want to be involved in that. I did want to mention something else before we get off of that completely, and that's the magic, I think, with the Papettis, where you started with this, Ken. The Papetti family had been in business for a long time. They were a New Jersey-based company who sold a lot of eggs to small markets in New York City. So they had the Teamsters, and they had all the unions that were involved in there, and Mr. Papetti, the old man, was a very tough leader, very, 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 very tough in a tough environment as well in New Jersey, New York. He could really hold his own, and so his management style essentially was to show up in the morning, like probably just the same way his dad had done, and tell everybody what to do. So everybody showed up, and he would tell them what to do for the day, and they go do it. And next day they'd show up, and if he hadn't done it, then he'd be all over him, literally. So that was the management style that Ken was walking into for this significant egg business. Now, being a traditional Italian family, the approach of the operations council, I think, really worked, because Ken, the magic ingredient there was respect, and showed the Papetti family, including the young Papetti, who was frankly pretty nervous about taking over that role from his dad in the company, and showing him a different way, but showing him with great respect. And started out with a meeting with, remember Ken, they were all sitting on one side of the table, and the Michael Foods guys were sitting on the other side of the table. It looked like the worst kind of union negotiations you could have.
I think we had 25 participants, 25 key leaders, and it was really split in half. It's almost like 12 key leaders on the Papetti side, 12 key leaders on the MG Wallenbaum side. I mean, it was, without exaggeration, one side of the table was like a union negotiation, and actually we wanted it to start that way. We knew it would start that way, I should say. And what we did in order to break that up, we changed the table from being a rectangular setup to more of a U-shape or circular setup. And we then intermixed the leaders from one division in with another. So I mean, and this was the kickoff for the transformation process. We created the environment, I guess you can say, just even in the room, to create teamwork.
You know, all the exercises that were done and the work that was done on the whiteboards and cross-functional teams were all cross-functional between the two companies, and then when they broke into roundtables to talk with each other. So and to work off of the whiteboard, and so but the respect that you showed for the Papetti family. Real, I mean, it was a way to show that you and the corporate organization really respected them as individuals and what they had built and what they'd accomplished. And they really felt that. They came in expecting that they were going to get treated like second-class citizens, and they didn't know what they were doing. And, you know, and these guys from Minneapolis were going to come in and fix them, right? And that was the opposite of what happened in there. And I think as an aside, I think it also helped that right across from the Papetti plant was this long, probably 4-story building that it looked like it was about 300 yards long. And it was the old Singer factory, making Singer sewing machines, one of the original Singer factories in New Jersey, and it was abandoned now. I mean, they closed down production there, but it was like a symbol of the old way.
Yeah, that's right.
Of the manufacturing of the production as it was, right? And so these guys, in the shadow of that almost, but certainly they could see it right across the fields, was this huge building, and that they lived with growing up all that time. And they were creating the new way for their company to work. And it worked out extremely well. I think that the young Mr. Papetti turned out to be a significant change agent and was very successful in the eyes of his family for what he had done to get them from the sale through the process, and then they made it, and they did extremely well at the turn with the buyout. So all in all, it landed quite well, but it was built on a foundation of respect, and I think that's what more than anything that carried the day, and with them from the beginning.
Even today, just to kind of even today in 2020, there's some form of that operations council still being used in Michael Foods. And Michael Foods, at the time I joined the company, was a $700 million top line company. It's now well over $2 billion. And that process is still in place to some degree within the organization. And that's how powerful the transformation process worked and continued to be used.
Well, the HR leader for Michael Foods, a friend of yours, actually picked it up inside and built the leadership and the foundations for the company out of that foundation that he learned going through the process with you.
Yep.
It sounds like a good 3 days at the whiteboard to achieve all these remarkable things during that period of time, and then to have it see the longevity of it today. So from Michael Foods, you go to Columbus, and again, you're the vice president of operations there. Tell us about Columbus, the situation, and what you did there, and how you took some of your learning from Michael Foods and Nabisco and applied it to Columbus.
Columbus was or is a salami and deli meat company. At the time that I joined the company, it was very operations focused. However, it was it was 80% owned by a private equity firm and 20% owned by a family. The 20% family was the original family that the private equity firm bought the company from. At Columbus, all other functions of the company had been transitioned away from being a family-run business. So transformation had already taken place to some degree in all other functions except operations. And the reason was because the 20% was mainly the lead. There were leaders still in the operations team. So I was specifically hired because of my experience at Michael Foods working within a family-run company, and my task was to go in there and transition or transform the operations team from a family-run business into a business that the rest of the organization was operating under. So it was extremely important when I first joined the company that for me to do the same thing that I really did at Michael Foods was to focus on respecting those members that were still part of the family within operations and building the trust so that a transformation process could have chance to be successful. The CEO that hired me was so focused on that, he even told me that I would spend the first 6 months with no responsibility at all within the company. And I looked at him like, you mean I'm not supposed to make any decisions? I'm not supposed to have anybody report to me for 6 months? And he said, yes. Because and the reason why he did that, he felt that it was important for me as the operations leader to not only learn the business and learn about how to produce salami and deli meat, but also to build the trust within the organization so that, again, I wasn't a big bad corporate guy trying to kick out all the family leaders and or the family practices. Fortunately, some circumstances happened from a food safety standpoint that it wasn't 6 months, it was 3 months where the situation was right for me to ask the CEO if I can assume responsibilities right away to create changes to fix some food safety issues that was in one of the 3 plants. At that time, that was enough time, as well as the results of, I'm going to say, fixing the quality of food safety issues within that one plant was significant to build the trust and credibility for myself within the rest of the Columbus organization. So I'm going to backtrack a little bit in terms of what the high priority of was at Columbus was being a family-run business and again, having a high influence in the operation team. The number one focus and almost the primary focus was to satisfy the customers. It was pretty much a traditional way of approaching how to run a company, which was we do everything we can to make the customer happy, no matter how much it cost, no matter how much pain it created through the organization, no matter what hoops we had to run through or jump through to make it happen, we would do what it takes to satisfy the customer. And so what was critical for me to do as the leader of ops was to create a vision and a strategy that was bigger than just satisfying the customer. So the experiences and the practices that and the learnings from Michael Foods were significant to bring that in to not only transform the leadership team, but again, to drive results, hard results within the operations team. So that's when I started another, again, an operations council process within Columbus, cross-functional teams, cross-location, along product lines. So we started that process really in the same way that we did, again, and repeating myself, as Michael Foods. The results were positive. The CEO, as well as the rest of the key leaders and the other functions of Columbus, were excited, enthusiastic, and motivated over the results of what was being done in operations. However, after let me pause for a second to make sure I got the timeline right. After 2 years of the transformation process, there was a significant change at the top of the company. So there was my boss, the CEO, was transitioned out, and the new CEO came in to run the company. And the main reason, the primary reason for that change of leadership really was the private equity firm wanted a leader that was going to transition the company to be sold to prepare the company to sell off the company, because the current private equity firm had owned the company for 5 years, and so it was time to turn the company over, and so that's why they brought this new leader in to create that change. The new leader that came in was not a proponent, was not a fan of continuous improvement process, utilizing team processes. And so despite me trying to continue to run the operations council, it really wasn't going to go anywhere, and it was really unsuccessful. I was kind of going uphill all the time, and it was very steep. It was very difficult. So I had to slowly walk away from the operations council process, or the transformation process, and refocus again on just building capabilities within the operations leadership team. In some instances, the new leader, not some instance, I could say the new leader, the new CEO of Columbus, was successful. The company sold within 6 months of him joining, 6 months and 9 months of him joining the company, and sold for a significant return on investment. So another good learning is coming out of Columbus for me.
Ken, let's go ahead and talk about your fourth experience at Boyds and the situation they were facing, and some of your learnings from that experience.
So Boyds Coffee Company is a company that is or was located in Portland, Oregon. It's a coffee company along with dry blended products that is focused significantly on the C stores, the convenience stores. So it was again a new food business that I had to learn the operations or the technical side of that. It was also a family-run business. It was 100% owned by the family for 100 years. The CEO of Boyd's Company was actually a former peer of mine within Columbus, and he left Columbus and actually was the first first leader of Boyd's to be a leader of the company outside the family. So he had significant challenges from a transformation standpoint. Similar to Columbus, he was successful in transforming the rest of the organization except for operations. So made significant strides in having key leaders in the other functions. So he brought me in to transform the operations team. even though, again, the family was still owned 100% of the business. There were significant financial challenges of Boyd's Coffee Company, not only from a profitability standpoint year over year, but I think more so from a cash flow standpoint. The amount of money coming in was not enough for the money that was going out. And so there was almost a daily practice of managing cash to make sure to keep the company surviving. At the same time, the company was growing. The top line was growing year over year. But yet, as the company was growing year over year from a top line standpoint, the challenges from a cash flow standpoint continued to get more challenging. So my first focus when I went into the operations team was to really focus on the leadership team, my ops staff, and creating the teamwork within that operations staff. That was a learning that I brought from Michael Foods, from Nabisco, and from Columbus. Once I felt that development was in place, I launched the Operations Council, fully supported by the CEO, to drive a continuous improvement process to drive productivity savings. The CEO had already tried CI, or continuous improvement process, before within Boyd's, and it was unsuccessful. It just didn't got off the ground, but never really drove the hard results. We were starting to drive some results within Boyd's. However, the cash flow challenges were just too big to overcome. And so we continue to fight that battle almost on a daily basis. And it was not only frustrating for me, but it was also frustrating for the teams that were in place to create the continuous improvement process. So after 1 year of starting the transformation process, Boyd's was on the market to sell the company. And so when that process started, and we were very open with the rest of the organization, including our team members in the plant, that the company was up for sale, driving a continuous improvement process that is long-term focus wasn't really sitting well, or doesn't sit well with the rest of the organization, as they know that eventually, the company is going to be sold. So we kind of put the continuous improvement process to the side and focus more on maintaining our day-to-day business of operating the company.
You've had significant experience now in the last three organizations we've talked about with private equity firms and the financing and how it intrudes on the long-term thinking and focuses on the financial results in the short term. In the beginning, it's fine, but later on, it can focus on it can limit the thinking in terms of how far out you get. But you were able to create an environment in there where, as I remember at Boyd's, where the team, especially your leadership team, were really working well together. And they were constantly frustrated about not having the cash that they needed to do the things that they came up with, even a little bit, right? I mean, they were experts at getting along with practically nothing, but they're getting along that way. But the improvements that they needed to make, the investment to do that, to do that, just wasn't there.
That's very correct. The learning at Boyd's, the significant learning at Boyd's, compared to the previous three companies of Nabisco, Michael Foods, and Columbus, all the other three companies, I didn't have to worry about cash flow. There was somewhat, call it, deep pockets available to invest in the company. whereas Boyd's, which was 100% family owned, there was no bank to go into, and so even to spend small amounts of money to improve something within operations was a challenge, and so it was just way too much to overcome.
Well, and what was happening in the market at the time was that the coffee companies, one by one, were being acquired by the larger companies, and so you were either Starbucks that started buying out your competitors like Seattle's Best Coffee and a whole bunch of others, or you were being sold to a company. And in this case, Boyd's was acquired by another company.
To add to that point, Boyd's was sold to Farmer Brothers. It was a successful transition because what happened, and I relate that to leadership, is that Farmer Brothers bought Boyd's Coffee Company, but didn't buy the plant, didn't buy the people. So the manufacturing or the plant in Portland was shut down, and everyone knew that. So we went into a transition of transitioning the business from Boyd's to Farmer Brothers, and all of us knew that, or the majority of us knew, we didn't have a job, not only from the top, but also down at the plant level. They knew they didn't have a job. And so what was significant about that is that created challenges within the organization, within the Boyd's organization, to make sure that we did our job or our focus to transition out of Boyd's Coffee to Farmer Brothers. And because of the work that we did to develop the leadership team in the operations side, it built a foundation that for me to coordinate and lead the effort on the Boyd side of essentially working ourselves out of a job was actually a success. And it was a positive result, only in the sense that we did it, we took the high ground, we did it in a way that we could we could be proud of how we did it. We did it in a way that we were one team from a Boyd's operations side. And it was obvious to the farmers organization.
A number of people in key positions did take jobs with Farmer Brothers.
Yeah, only a few in operations. Yeah, a lot, several in sales.
Yeah, and for a number of them, it would have been a move from Portland, Oregon, down to Texas. Many of them didn't want to do it anyhow, but there were some really great people there that had been there a long time, and you were able in operations to keep the place, because of the leadership team, to keep the operations running through the commitment. And I remember one of the things that happened is that the acquiring organization, in this case farmers, kept adding additional demand into your plant as it was shutting down. And you guys were able to deliver on that as well.
That's correct.
So even as though they're shutting the plant down, the brand was growing, and so they kept wanting you to produce more while you were in the process of closing it up. Which I thought, and you were able to do that, which I thought was phenomenal. And so you closed with a lot of goodwill in the process at the time, and including among your team at the plant at the same time. Very well done.
There seems to be a consistent theme through a lot of all the stories that you've told so far, around this importance of trust and respect, developing the leadership. As you sort of reflect back on your career and the successes and maybe the things that didn't go the way that you had hoped in terms of the transitions, what would you say are the key lessons, the things that really stand out for you, the key lessons about leading a transformational change process?
So I'm going to start with what you've heard me say over the last, covering the 4 companies, is that leadership in all aspects were significantly important. And I'll touch on each aspect and how that is that First is in the successful ones where the transformation process, not only from a soft result, from a hard results standpoint, was having support from the top of the organization. That was significant because I didn't have to worry about somebody looking over my shoulder and micromanaging what was being done in operations, as long as I was driving the results. And so having that top support at the CEO or / president level of the organization was very impactful. On the flip side, from an experience standpoint, not having the support at the top of the organization is significant, where trying to drive change or a transformation process is extremely difficult and challenging when the rest of the organization is not accepting it or not supporting it. And that was obviously experienced at Columbus. You have to make hard decisions to walk away or find a new way to drive results. And so another part of leadership is from a development standpoint. As I started in Nabisco, for me, always to continuously learn and to grow as a leader was important for me to transfer that same concept onto the rest of the leaders of the organization in all four of the companies I work for. So continuous education of the leaders, and it was almost like it was a continuous improvement process inside of the continuous improvement process. So in order to drive hard and soft results, we had to continue to develop the leaders on a daily and weekly and monthly and yearly basis. It was important to leverage their strength and to build on their weaknesses. Then the fourth point from a leadership standpoint would be having the right leaders in the right seat of the bus. I learned the hard way that you can continue to develop leaders, but at some point there are some leaders that are not going to get it. And so there were times, I should say, when hard decisions had to be made to change out leadership, change out the leaders. And that was probably one of the more difficult things to do, because I always felt that I was this great teacher and this great leader that can change anything. And I learned that was not the case. And so another learning, lessons learned, was celebrating successes on a continued basis. I always thought, well, yeah, that's a simple thing to understand. I mean, of course you celebrate the wins, but I thought you celebrate the big wins. But it wasn't only celebrating the big wins, it was celebrating the small wins. And especially at the beginning of driving a transformation change process, celebrating the small wins were significant, because you aren't going to get big wins when you start a process. And that was, even though that sounds like common sense, it really wasn't for me. And so I had to learn the hard way. And it was important, and which then, I think I said it earlier, was it drove enthusiasm, it drove motivation, it drove a sense of ownership as we celebrated small and large successes within the transformation processes. And I'm going to add to that on the successes was being creative with those successes. What are we celebrating? Is it all monetary, or is it just buying donuts for a team or for teams? So it was a wide spectrum, and finding creative ways to celebrate those successes. The last two things of learnings was hard results versus soft results. with the teachings and the learnings that I got from my past experiences before Nabisco, as well as working with Bill and his associates within the Belgard organization, I was very much enthusiastic on driving the soft results. In other words, driving leadership development. And I got, I guess you can say, overzealous with it, to the point where thinking that was enough. And I mentioned earlier, you have to have the hard results that go along with it. Otherwise, transformation processes aren't going to be successful or looked at as being successful. You have to have that, and have to have the measurement process in place to do that. And one of the key things to do that was to, in each of the transformation process I drove, I found the right financial leaders within the organization, even though they didn't report to me, to be part of the transformation process. In other words, they were team members within the process, and it was important to have those financial leaders participating. And going back to Michael Foods, each Michael Foods teams, and there were 5 teams at Michael Foods. Each of them had a financial leader that were participating in the teams. So that was critical from a standpoint. And then the final learning was to create for each of the change processes the vision and the strategy up front. People or team members needed to see where we were going, what's in it for them, and what's in it for their teams. And so the vision and the strategy was critical to have it from the beginning and not done halfway through the process. Everyone needed to know where we were going. And what that did was it really showed that we were going to walk the talk, and we were going to be consistent from a leadership standpoint to continue with a process that was going to drive results, both hard and soft, for the company.
That's a great list, Ken. One of the things that we had briefly discussed in sort of our pre-interview talk that I thought was really interesting, I'd like you to maybe just speak to for a moment, was this idea that when you're trying to transform an organization, timing is really critical. Could you just talk a little bit about what you meant by that exactly, and why it is so important around getting the timing right?
I'll use Michael Foods and Columbus as examples. And so Michael Foods, the spending the 12 months as the VP of Operation at MG Walbaum and building leadership capabilities and building teamwork within the MG Walbaum was critical to going into the transformation process to integrate the 2 divisions. So if I had started to integrate the 2 divisions at Michael Foods 1 month after I started the company, it would have failed. No doubt about it, because I wouldn't have even had the respect and the trust of my own operations staff, let alone the Pipetti's operations staff. And so the timing was critical. Then you move into that 3 months that I spent building the respect and trust with my counterpart at Pipetti's, who was the VP of Operations. That was you take the flip side. If I had walked over there and if I'd gone over to the East Coast and just said, "Here, hey, my name's Ken Neishi, and we're going to start a change process," they probably would have put me on the next plane back to the Midwest, because it wouldn't have worked. I would have done the same thing that everybody else, that others had tried at Michael Foods to do that. Then just the other example would be at Columbus. That even despite the fact that I didn't agree with the CEO of me not doing anything for 6 months and not having a responsibility, he knew what he was doing. He knew he was setting me up in a positive way for me to be to build the trust, the respect, and the trust. Again, within the operations team, but also within the rest of the Columbus organization. So again, that timing of when was the right time to really create that transformation process and launch it was critical at Columbus. Not only from not only from the entire leadership team at Columbus, but also from those family members that were still operating and participating in the operations team.
I think that's really a great answer, and really talks to the importance of there is a time when it's going to be more effective and a time when it probably may not even work. And you're basically trying to do the same thing, but the timing is such a critical element. Last question I have here, Ken, is what advice would you give an executive that's looking to transform his or her organization based on your experiences?
It's good. So it's going to be somewhat repetitive, but of what I've talked about with all the other experiences. But I think at the top of the list would be building trust. Building trust as an individual leader, and at the right time, once that trust is on the right path, is building the trust within the team and the team leaders. And so in every transformation process that I took on, that part of the equation, I'm going to say, or that part of that aspect of it was critically important in order for the rest of the organization or the organization to look up to me and follow where we needed to go. The second advice is that part about is assessing the leadership capabilities within your organization. And that needs to be from the very beginning. Don't just walk in there and think that you have a process or a written process in a book. And you just open that book up and hand it out to everybody. You make sure that you assess the leaders that report to you, the leaders that are influencing the organization, that the transformation process that takes place, and making sure you understand their strengths and weaknesses. And then, as mentioned before, having the ability to make tough decisions to get the right people in the right seat of the bus, and not implementing that myself, but having the key leaders make their decisions on their leaders, because there's a pyramid effect here, and so they've got to be able to have the ability to make their hard decisions of having the right leaders in the right seat in their organization at the lower level. Another thing would be making sure you have solid support throughout the organization, especially at the top. I think I've talked enough about that to emphasize that having support at the top of the leadership organization is important to drive a successful transformation process. And the last thing I'll say is to stay humble, whether you're at the beginning or well into the process where results are being driven, is being a humble leader through that. And this is a quote that Mr. Bill Belgard taught me as we were going gangbusters at Michael Foods. And prior to the president of Michael Foods, Bill Goucher, implementing the transformation process into the rest of the organization at Michael Foods, I was beginning to, I'm going to put it in my words, and Bill probably could put it in better words, but getting a big head I was beginning to think that I could walk on water. And Bill told me on the phone, he says, don't read your own press. It took me a while to digest what he was saying, even on the phone, but even I had to get off the phone and think about that. Don't read your own press. And that goes back to being a humble leader. It was probably, for me as an individual, is probably the most significant learning I had in the process.
At that time, the president of the company had not yet come along, but you were doing so well, and I think it was your humility in the process and your willingness to share everything with it that allowed him to take it on and do it himself across the organization. And to say when he was retiring that he wished he'd known about this 30 years ago.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
Yes, that's
it's a success in the way you were having it and had it. If one who remains humble during that process is able to influence others in a much more powerful way.
Well, to your point, I mean, that president was probably 40 years into his career when he made that transformation change as a leader. So he was, talk about traditional old way of thinking. He was that way. I mean, just a quick example there was that those monthly meetings were not only focused on short-term results, but it was a browbeating. I'd walk out of those meetings with my head between my legs.
Yeah, it was that you engendered a great deal of respect from him, and then that began to change his behavior. And I think he found out he enjoyed his job a whole lot more at the end. And
yeah, he did. Yes, yeah, it was a lot of fun.
And he was having a great time doing this. He was a hero with the board too. And at one of those terms going forward, everybody involved with that did extremely well because of the success that was had. There was probably $1 billion extra dollars on the bottom line because of the work of the operations council across the company and their ability to work together and build that the ability for the organization to operate across in large and small teams across the organization. And that's a testament to how it all started and the humility with which you did it.
Ken, you're indeed a humble leader. Thank you very much. Appreciate the interview today. It was great. Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed today's podcast. If you have any questions or would like to speak with a transformation specialist, please contact us at info@ascensionts.com. Thanks for listening.